All right. Oop. There we go. Okay. All right. So we've got our quick access, our ribbon, all of our commands, our project browser, our properties dialog box, our drawing space. We can flip between our views and drawing space by holding down control and tab, 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 and it will go back and forth between the drawings. Okay. If I have, 15 views open and they're all stacked on top of one another, I can come up here to close hidden window. Click. And it will close out all of the windows behind the current window I have open. And I know it has done that because I can go to switch windows and now I only see one view. All right. I have, and these two tool palettes, the project browser and the properties browser, they can stack one on another. Do you see how if I click on this tab up here and I drag it over on top of properties and I let go, these tab. Okay, so if you only have one screen and you don't want to take up the entire screen, you can stack them like that. To get one, to detach them, I can click and hold on one of the tabs and drag it over and let go. Okay, I can also stack one. Hopefully this will work. Hold on a second. Oop, not up there. Well, you can dock it up there, obviously. Oh, this might be a little tricky. If you only have one screen, when you first open Revit out of the box, usually these two windows, these two tool palettes there's one on top and one on bottom and they're docked off to the side, right? If you have one screen, they will dock off to the side. It's not going to happen for me though today because I have two screens and they're extended, so it won't catch the side of my monitor very easily with two screens right now. But you are able to stack them one on top of the other when you have one screen. Okay. All right, I want to remind you that we have some visual settings down here. We have this kind of visual tool palette down here where we have scale. This is where you're going to change scale. And I just want to remind you that all of these objects down here are view specific, meaning when I change these, it will change it in the view that I have currently viewed on my screen. Not the one stacked behind that view, but that current view on my screen. All right, it won't change it universally. I can click and change the scale. I have my detail level, so this will show different level of detail on my floor plans, on everything really. It's a good kind of practice to maybe make it a medium detail level. And I'll remind you of what that looks like when we get into some other things. We have our visual styles here, so do we want it wireframe, hidden line, shaded, right? Realistic, consistent colors. I'm going to change mine to hidden line. But that is just how we're viewing it on the screen. It doesn't actually physically change anything. It just visually makes it look different, right? So you can switch those back and forth and to be able to view your model better without actually changing anything in your model, okay? We're not going to worry about these two. We will worry about cropping our views though. So we have a crop boundary. This little show crop region with a light bulb, click. When I click on that, the crop region appears, okay? Anything that I have inside the crop region will show. Anything outside of it, should I choose to crop my view, will not show, right? So this is just essentially, I mean, it's cropping things in and out of your view, right? It allows you to customize what you see on this view. Now, again, this is view specific, so it's not going to apply to every view if you change it here, right? But I can click on these little grips and I can drag these in. If I don't want to see my elevation markers, right, I can even kind of crop out my elevation markers. This crop region will print, so if you don't want it to print, you need to come down here and click on hide crop region and it goes away. All right. Now, I'm going to turn that crop region back on. Those elevation markers are still there. It didn't delete them. I'm going to choose to not crop my view. See how they come back? They are there. They're just not being shown. They're being cropped out of that view. All right. I have a temporary hide isolate. That will allow me to select an object. Okay. And it will allow me to, if I click on that again while I have an object selected, to maybe hide. And I chose hide category, so it hid all objects in that category, which included the other elevation markers in my view. Okay. It's a temporary hide isolate. So this command is really essentially there for me to help me draw things. So I turn something off really quick, I draw something in its place, and then I turn it back on if it needs to be turned back on. Okay. When I want to get rid of that temporary hide isolate, I click on it and I choose reset. Okay. We have reveal hidden elements. There's only one in here. We're not going to talk about this thing just yet. But reveal hidden elements will allow you to turn on elements that you have permanently hidden, which we haven't learned how to do yet. I click on that again and it goes away. Okay, so just all visual elements down here. All right. I'm going to click on my crop region here and just kind of drag it out a little. I'm going to leave my crop region on here so that you can kind of see what happens with it if we end up engaging it. All right. Okay, so for those of you that have never used AutoCAD before, I want to talk about how to navigate about our drawing board, all right? I want to learn how we zoom in and how we zoom out and how we pan back and forth first, okay? So your mouse is going to be very key in moving around your drawing board, all right? Did we talk about this last time? I'm thinking we maybe, or am I thinking about AutoCAD? Anyway, you want to have a mouse that has a middle roller button on it, okay, because it makes it really easy and dynamic for you to move around, okay. So the middle roller button, if I roll it towards the computer, I zoom in, right? If I roll it backwards, I zoom back out. If I hold the middle roller button down, I move back and forth, okay. If I hold the middle roller button down and I move back and forth with my mouse, I have to continue to hold it down. It's called a pan. Okay, so zoom in, zoom out, pan back and forth. Okay, I can also zoom extents. So if I have this drawing and I've zoomed way too far out and it's all the way down over here, right, and I can't find my drawing, if I double click my middle roller twice very fast, click, click, it zooms it to the extent of the drawing and it brings it back on screen. Okay.
Does this do like a cursor menu with your middle button?
I'm sure you could set it because we do have a right click, so I'm sure that you could set it so that your middle button, yeah, does the menu. Are you one of those guys? Menu on your middle button that kills everybody when they come and work on your computer.
Everyone hates it.
Yeah, I bet they do. I'm just kidding. Personal preference, right? Whatever you want to do. But yes, you can set your middle button so that if you click your middle button instead of navigating, a menu pops up. Right? I don't understand why when you have a right click. Right?
You just use it for command.
Yeah? You like it better?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I was trying.
There you go. Nope, that's good too, but I'm sure that's just a setting through your, I think through your mouse. Like the, yeah. Okay, 1/3 setting that we have with our mouse is the ability to orbit. So this is something that in AutoCAD you don't do a whole lot unless you're working in 3D. But in Revit you're going to pan. You're going to pan back and forth. You're going to zoom in and out, and when you're in a 3D view, you are going to orbit. Oh, it's Brian. Here we go. All right, so if I go into a 3D view, right, up here on my quick access, which I don't really have anything in here yet, right? Click, hello, it's okay. I know I'm in 3D because my view cube looks like this, right? Let me just draw something in here quickly so that you can see what's happening. All right, there's my wall. And if I want to orbit around it, which means, you know, kind of 3D float around this object to view it, what you'll want to do is hold down your middle button and shift at the same time. So middle button, down, shift, and you move your mouse around. Okay, so that's orbiting. You can also zoom in, you can zoom out, hold your middle button and pan back and forth. Okay.
Where's the 3D button again?
It's up here at the top. Yep. Okay. All right, so here's, and again, I just zoom extents, right? So if you need to zoom extents, you can also do that in 3D. Okay. All right, so we've just kind of talked about how to navigate. Let's talk about some of our drawing tools. And I want to talk about drawing tools today and about some selection methods, right? And for those of you that have already drawn in AutoCAD, this will be, you know, pretty easy, right? The commands basically function the same. There's a few slight differences, but those of you that haven't had AutoCAD, this will help, okay? I'm going to come back here to my architecture tab, all right? And today we're just going to talk about drawing. We're not going to talk about modification. That will come a little bit later. But in order for us to draw something, we have to have a command active to draw. It's like in AutoCAD, if you want to draw a line, you have to initiate the command, right? You have to first initiate the command, click a first point, move in the direction you want to go, and then give a dimension, you know, either a dimension or just click to finish the command, okay? And Revit is no different. We have to, number one, initiate the command. We can do that by clicking on an icon or typing a keyboard shortcut. Okay, we need to specify a starting point. We're going to do that by clicking I'm just going to call this model space, right? AutoCAD terms, which is the drawing board, right? We're going to click in model space here, and then we're going to move our mouse in the direction we want that object to be drawn in, and then we're going to either type a dimension or just click to end the command. All right. AutoCAD, it's very easy. You click, 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 click away, right? It's really simple to make lines. In Revit, we're not drawing lines, we're drawing objects. Okay, so there's a difference there. We're drawing objects. And in this case, we'll be drawing walls. All right. So, and again, this is very simply how to just draw them, not how to define them. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. All right, so I kind of opened the view that I want to draw my object in, and for now we're just going to stay in level 1. So I'm going to come over here to my project browser, click, click on level 1. I'm in level 1. All right, I'm going to come over here to my wall icon, right? And if I drop down with the menu, I have an architectural, a structural, or a by face. I'm just going to choose architectural, which is a default. If I were to just hit escape and click on wall, it would pick that architectural wall, okay? So by doing that, if I hit escape, do you see how my cursor is an arrow, right? But if I come and click on wall, I can also type WA, right? For those of you that want a keyboard shortcut, escape, escape, WA, it initiates that same command. And I was gonna get used to those shortcuts, I haven't yet though. So I do that and it initiates the command. And some things that you're going to see happen in my Revit interface are, you know, really I get some options up here that are different than were there before, right? Revit has a ton of options. So you'll see that I have a little drawing tool palette show up here. You'll notice that I have a some options here like, 20 feet, right? Wall center line, chain, offset. We're not really going to worry about those too much right now. We're going to leave them as they are, but later on those options will be changed, okay? Really what we're worried about is how do we create this geometry, okay? So I'm going to, first of all, choose what I want to draw. Today we're going to go over line, rectangle, we're going to go over circle for sure, we're going to go over arc, we're going to go over pick, okay? And then we're not going to worry about these too much just yet, or this one. We'll get to these a little bit later. All right, so I'm going to hit escape again and start this whole thing over so you can see where I was, where I've been. One major difference between Revit and AutoCAD is that you don't have a command line entry, right? I can type WA, but it doesn't enter, like I don't see it being typed anywhere on the screen, right? It's just kind of an invisible typing. So I could click here, I could type WA, and it initiates the command. Now I don't have a formal command line, but you do notice down here it says click to enter wall start point. So it is giving me a hint, like, hey, if you don't know what's next, look down there at the bottom left and it will kind of tell you, you know, what you have to do next, okay? I am going to choose my method of drawing, right? So if I want to draw a line, I would come up here and click on line, okay? To initiate this command, I'm going to click, I'm going to move in the direction I want to go, and if I just want to create a wall without a specific dimension, I'll click again. Now this command right now, you know, I've established an endpoint, but I could keep going. So this command is chaining, right? Meaning it's just going to keep going until I say stop, all right? And it's chaining because I have this chain option selected up here, right? Another thing you're going to have to start getting used to in Revit is that options pop up all over the place, right? So options having to do with multiple copies or chaining a command or offsetting, right? They don't appear like they do in AutoCAD. They appear up at the top, and generally they appear before you start the command. So if you start the command, sometimes they disappear, and then sometimes they don't, right? It's just something you'll have to get used to. But we have a lot of options and we have to specify those, okay? So right now I have this chain option selected, so I could just keep drawing. Click, 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 escape, escape, and I've drawn a wall, all right? Now we haven't really defined that wall, and we haven't really created a specific dimension for these walls, right? But we've drawn some walls, all right? Another thing you're gonna get very used to in Revit is when you draw something, you look at it. Go back and look at it, make sure it's right. You can measure it if you want, or you can go into 3D, right? Here's our 3D, click, and you can take a look at it, all right? I can orbit by holding down my middle button and shift and moving my mouse, right? This orbit is kind of a, yep.
Why is mine in pencil?
Yours, why does yours look different, right? That's a good question. It's, yours is too? What? Yes, yes, why, who has an answer to that one? I bet somebody knows. You're close. Right next, it's the visual style, yep, yep. Very close. So we have our visual style down here, right? My visual style is shaded. Okay, click, mine's shaded. Yours is all in hidden line, click. So yours looks like this, right? And mine is in shaded. All right, so it doesn't change it. It doesn't make it so that, you know, it's something else because it looks grayish. It's just a different way of viewing it, all right? So I'm gonna orbit around. I popped into 3D right here. And then I held down shift and I held down my middle button and I moved my mouse about and I'm orbiting. Now orbiting seems very simple. It's really easy to do until you get a big model, and the way that it orbits is about kind of the center of the drawing. So if you have a big building, it starts flipping itself all the way around your screen, right? AutoCAD 3D does the same thing. If you get in a perspective view or a big drawing, it'll just start being, it just really doesn't work with you, right? So if you start getting weird orbits where it's not being controlled very easily, a good way of orbiting is picking an object and then holding shift in the middle button and just orbiting, and it keeps it kind of local. So you'll see me do that all the time, all right? So if I'm having trouble orbiting around something, if it's winging around my model space here, I pick one object and I just start orbiting, and that controls it a little better. Okay, I'm gonna hit escape. How did I do what? When I orbited, I held shift and I held the middle roller button down and I moved my mouse. Yes, orbit will only work in 3D. So if you're in a flat plan view, you can't orbit. You can pan back and forth and zoom in and out, but you can't orbit. Okay. All right, so I'm in this view and I think, okay, it's time for me to go back to my floor plan because I want to create some more walls. There's a couple of ways I can get back to my floor plan. I can come over here and I can double click on my floor plan over here. I could also, if I am thinking about it and I remember that I was in my floor plan and it's below this view on my screen, I could come over here and close out of this view and the floor plan would show below it, right? I could also come up here to switch windows, click, and click on level 1. Okay, so there's a few different ways to get back and forth between views. If I want to look at my views simultaneously, meaning I have the main level, the second level, and my 3D views stacked on one another, and I want to look at them all at the same time, while I'm in one of these views, I just type WT, which is window tile, and it tiles the windows on the screen. Okay, so I can come over here to orbit, I can orbit about, but you notice if I select that wall, do you see it selects over here as well? See, this is why you need 2 screens, right? So that those property dialog boxes don't eat up half of your screen. But you'll notice over here that it is also selected. And if I select a different object, right, it selects in these other windows. Okay, so again, there's that parametric relationship. you know, and I'm viewing this model in 3 different areas, and all of those objects, even though I'm looking at them differently, they're all the same object, right? And so I pick it one place and it picks it in the other place, okay?
Well, how did you end up with 3 windows here?
With 3 windows?
Yeah, because I only have 2.
You only have 2? Well, you didn't, I had an extra window open. The number that are appearing on my screen are the amount of views I had open when I tiled the view, right? So let's do that again. Let me open up a few more windows, right? If I open up south, if I open up east, if I open up the ceiling plan in level 1, right? If I drop this down, hello, I notice that I have 6, right? And if I come here and I type WT, whoops, WT, it will tile 6. So whatever you have open, it tiles. Okay.
Is there a way to just open 2 specific ones if you have all those pages?
Yeah, well, so yes, what you can do is, it's a little bit more tricky, right? The best idea is just to close everything, open up those 2 and tile them. But you can, for example, minimize that one, and then what is left, WT, it'll just do those 5, right? And the 6th one is kind of minimized down there, but it's just more work than it's worth, right? Okay. So I'm just gonna, maximize one of my views here. This is the ceiling view. I know it's my ceiling view because I see ceiling plan right there, and I also look at my browser and I see level 1 ceiling plan is open. And I also can come up here and I can see reflected ceiling plan is open. Okay. I think one of the biggest mistakes I see happening when you're starting to use the software is that the ceiling plans and the floor plans look very similar, right? But one is looking down and one is looking up, okay? And so you'll just come over here and say, oh, level 1, click, click, level 1. And you think you're in the floor plan, but you're in the ceiling, and then nothing is working, and there's toilets on the ceiling, and you don't know what's happened. And number 1 mistake, right? So just pay attention. A lot of times when I'm working, I'll just close the ceiling plan until I'm ready to use it, or I'll close the floor plans while I'm working on the ceiling plan so that I don't mistake the 2. Okay. Okay. Right. So we're learning how to navigate around. We're learning how to draw some things today. Okay. Let's go back and draw some more walls, right? In AutoCAD, we draw lines. In Revit, we draw objects, which translates into walls. Okay. So I'm going to draw another wall object, click, and I'm going to use the line tool to draw that wall, right? So I click on my line tool again. You'll notice I have my chain selected right here, so it'll be a continuous draw when I actually click, move in the direction I want to go, click again, move in the direction I want to go, click again. Okay. Biggest thing that you're going to have to get used to when you've been using AutoCAD for 15 years, right? is that the default unit in Revit is the foot. It is not the inch, right? Everybody's like, what does that mean? No, just kidding. So in AutoCAD, right, when I want to input 6 inches, right, I just type 6, enter. And it assumes that 6 is inches because that's the default unit, right, in AutoCAD. But in Revit, the foot is the default unit. And so if I type 6, enter, it assumes 6 feet. All right, so you'll get used to doing what I'm going to show you in a second. Okay, the input is generally the same as AutoCAD, the syntax for the most part. So let me show you how we're going to start typing in dimensions. All right, so when I want to create a wall that has a specific dimension, okay, let me hit escape, and I'm just going to start my wall command over again. I come up here, I click on wall, click, it initiates the command, right? I've got my drawing tools for that object here. Down here at the bottom it says click to enter the wall start point, so I know that's what I have to do next. So I click, move in the direction I want to go, and if I want to create a wall that is 20 feet, I type 20 and I hit enter. All right. Now by doing that, again, the default unit in Revit is the foot, and so it's going to create a 20-foot long wall, all right, as opposed to 20 inches, which is what we get used to in AutoCAD, right? When I work in AutoCAD, I always, just to have it, and it's just me, but I tend to work in inches. You know, I think 10 feet, that's 120 inches, right? So I just type that in, but you have to get used to working just a little bit differently. You know, it's the same thing, just kind of opposite, right? So if I wanted to create something that is 20 feet 6 inches, right, I would type 20 space 6, right? Enter. Which is different from AutoCAD because it is forbidden to use the space bar, right? Unless you want to hit enter. Yep.
How do you keep the walls straight, like in a 90 degree?
Like an ortho kind of thing. Yes, right? We don't have typical object snaps, right? But what's really nice is, do you see we have a somewhat of a dynamic input going on here in the screen. Do you see I've got that angle happening? It will by default just kind of snap to a straight location, right? Like that. So if you see that blue dashed line, see how you don't see it now? There's my straight point. Okay, so let's do 20 foot 5 1/2 inches. There's just spaces in between now. Okay, and it creates that 20 foot 5.5 inches. Okay, spaces in between everything. Again, it's very hard to get used to that when you've been working in AutoCAD for so long, because you don't use the space bar because it's not a space, it's an enter command in AutoCAD, right? But in Revit, it just gives you space between the specific dimensions. Okay, yep.
Can you put 0.5?
You can. That was, I'm always worried about bringing that topic up early because I don't want people to get confused on the topic of decimal versus architectural units like AutoCAD has, right? But in Revit, we can do that. We can type something like 20, well, okay, let me say this. If I type 20.5, that means 20.5 feet. So it would be 20 foot 6 inches, right? But I could type 20 space 0.5, and that would be 20 feet and a half inch. Right? So if you're used to using decimals, or, you know, like, and I do the same thing in AutoCAD. If it's 10.5 inches, I'll type 10.5, right? I'm very lazy. I don't like to take my hand off the keyboard and look for the foot and the inch mark, and right? So I just use decimals, and I use, what's that?
You put 20.5.5.
Well, sure. Yeah, if you're being crazy, right? No. Yeah, so it would be 20 foot 6.5 inches, right? 20.5 space 0.5. Yes. Okay. So what if I want to just do inches? What if I want 4 inches, right? What you're going to do is you're going to type 0 space 4. Enter. Right? So it's just a matter of getting used to, you know, the way that Revit functions. Okay. One thing that you're also probably noticing, when I start drawing something, I get these blue dimensions, right? They're called temporary dimensions. So it's just a graphic way of Revit letting you know kind of what you're drawing. It's pretty helpful. You have to keep your eye on them because they don't always go from end to end. Sometimes they go from center to center, or they try and draw from another source as if you were trying to do a from command, like 3 feet from this wall, I want to draw this object, right? So you just have to keep your eye on the temporary dimensions, okay? But what's nice about them is that once I've drawn an object, you know, it kind of tells me how big it is, right? Okay. I'm going to escape. What's also nice is that when I select it, do you see how it shows, and here's where you have to kind of watch it. It's 2'10" from that center line of this wall, right? We can manipulate all the settings so that maybe it doesn't draw from that center line. But what's nice about these temporary dimensions is that I can also come up here and click on that dimension and it becomes active, and I could type 10 foot, enter. Okay, and what's also nice is that, let me undo that. What's also nice is that you see there's this little, I guess maybe kind of grip-like object underneath the dimension. It's temporary and it's blue unless I want it to be there permanently. And then if I click on this little dimension, click, it converts it to an actual dimension, as if I pulled it from using the dimension command. Okay, so let's look at this drawing command again in sequence. I want to draw a wall, right? In Revit, we draw objects. We draw walls. We don't, like in AutoCAD, take a line, draw a line, offset it, offset it, offset it, offset it to create a wall, right? This is actually a 3D wall when I draw a wall. So I come up here to wall, I can click on it to initiate it, or I can type WA to initiate it on the keyboard, click. I choose the drawing tool that I want to draw that object with. Okay, so for now I want to create a line, click. I start my first point, I click. I move in the direction I want to go, and I can either visually, you see how it says 23 feet? I can visually say, yeah, I want it 23 feet, click. Or I can move in the direction I want to go and I can type a dimension, 10 foot space 6, enter. Okay, and if I want, 9 foot 6 and 1/2, I'm putting spaces between them. Okay, if you, I think if maybe you put a dash, yeah, I was gonna say it will ask you if you are doing a formula, right? So those of you that have been using AutoCAD for a long time, right? If you put dashes in AutoCAD, right? But in Revit, if you do that, it gets kind of confused because there's areas where we do formulas in Revit. So 1/2 or 0.5, enter. Okay. I can do angles, click, escape. If I click on that, oh, my angle's not popping up there. There we go. I can look at it and I can change that angle. Okay. Now, let's talk a little bit about, maybe you're comfortable with doing this, maybe you're not quite yet, but, let's talk a little bit about, we'll move topics and let's talk about how we can delete and select some of these objects if we do them incorrectly, right? So I've drawn a few things. I know that I can initiate the wall command, choose my drawing, drawing tool like the line, okay? I draw things, I know I have temporary dimensions, I know how to input dimensions, I know that the foot is the default unit in Revit, but how do I, if I make a mistake, how do I undo that mistake, or how can I delete it, or how can I alter it, right, once I've done something. Selection methods in Revit are just like those in AutoCAD. Okay, we have three selection methods essentially. We have selection windows and we have a pick. Okay, so a selection window, I'm going to zoom out a little so I can see everything and you can see what happens. My selection window, if I come up here to the top right of this window and I click and hold my left mouse button and I drag a window down over my drawing, anything that touches, it selects, right? So even if I just barely touch the corner of these two objects, it selects them, okay? And when I select them, I can modify them. I can delete them, I can choose to rotate, copy, move, do whatever I want. Let me hit escape. If I click and I hold and I move down, right, I can get all of them. Escape, escape. On the opposite end of the drawing board, so on the bottom left, if I click and hold my right mouse button and I drag my cursor up over these objects, I don't get a colored selection window like I do in AutoCAD, but this type of selection will only select objects that are entirely in that selection window. Okay, so until that entire line is in that window, I'm not going to be able to pick it. And you also notice I'm touching a bunch of stuff, but it's not selecting, and that's because it's not entirely in the window, right? So this allows a little bit more of a precise selection, okay, when you have a lot of things around. So in order for me to pick things, I have to select them in their entirety. Okay, escape, escape. I also have a pick where I hover over an object, it turns blue, it highlights, and I click on it, and I've selected it. Now in AutoCAD, if I pick something else, it continuously, it's additive. I can add objects every time I pick on something, right? In Revit, if I pick something and then I click on something else, click, it deselects the first item and selects the second item, right? So click, click, click. Now this is probably my most annoying pet peeve between AutoCAD and Revit. In order for me to continue to select objects in Revit, I have to hold down the control button, click, shift will allow me to remove, click, right? But what does Shift do if you hold down the middle roller button in AutoCAD? Pops you into 3D, right? So you get used to using the Shift button in Revit when I tell everybody in AutoCAD, unless you're working in 3D, keep your hand off of the Shift button, because if you do that, you might bump into 3D a tiny bit and then you draw crooked lines, right? They're not straight. So this is kind of my biggest pet peeve with AutoCAD and Revit. You are allowed to make selections, right? Kind of precisely this way. So I'm going to hit escape, escape. I can click and pick. I can click on and hold. I'm holding the control button down. Click, 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 click. And then I can delete, modify, rotate, copy, do whatever I want to do. If I wanted to delete these, I could hit delete on my keyboard. Okay. If I want to bring them back, just like AutoCAD, I have an undo button, right? So I can come up here and I can click on undo, click, and it brings them back. I could also type Control Z and it will bring them back, right? Undo is Control Z, so that works in Revit as well. Yep. Yes, you can. You can. Yep. Okay. So we can use our selection window. We can use our picks to select things. One other final way that we can select objects is using tab, right? So if I hover over an object, I'm just hovering, I'm not picking, I'm just hovering, and I press the tab key one time and let go. Okay? It will highlight anything that is connected to that object. Okay, so this chain of walls, tab, they're connected, right? This intersects, it's not necessarily connected at a vertice, right? But these are all connected at endpoints. So if I hover over this, I'm not clicking, I hover, tab once, it will select all those objects. Now it's time for me to click, click, and it selects them. Okay, the trick to this is that if I hover, I tab, and then I move, it goes away, right? But it's pretty helpful. Tab once, click, selected, delete, right? If I want to undo, Control Z, undo, and it's back, right? If I tab one time, it selects everything. I can tab again and it goes back to one object. Tab, 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 tab. Okay. Tab is also used to select things within objects. Let me just give you an example. You don't have to worry about it quite yet. We're looking at this wall. Well, I'm going to change this wall type so that you can see it real quick. Hold on. There we go. Okay. This wall type has, it's a exterior brick on CMU wall, but I don't see those striations, the layers in that wall, right? So I'm going to come down here to detail level. I'm going to change it to medium. And now those are showing up, all right? So that's what we go from what is those? Coarse. From coarse to medium, that's the kind of detail level we get. I'm in a hidden view. If I type shaded view, SD, it changes to color. HL, hidden line, okay? Tab will, sorry, let me step back. If I click on this, it will select it. I can delete it, move it, copy it, rotate it. All right, there are going to be times where maybe I want to align different objects with this, different layers in this object, okay? If I tab and I'm kind of zoomed into this area, tab, let me, just one second. I have to have a command active to do it. Tab. Do you see how right now I have the middle selected, but if I tab, it goes to that side of whatever that material is. Tab, 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 tab. So tab will allow me to cycle to different places on an object when I'm trying to create a dimension or align something with it. Okay, escape, escape, right? I'm zooming back out. All right, any questions so far?
So is the thickness of the wall by default 4 inches always?
Well, so this one right here, did you say 4 inches? So,
Yeah.
well, the thickness of this wall, it's a generic 8-inch wall, okay? So this one is actually 8 inches. I'm gonna hit escape and select this one. This one is whatever thickness brick on CMU ends up being, right? So the thickness is really defined by the assembly of the wall elements, which we will talk about next week. Yeah. So we're going to talk about how to define this as a brick on CMU wall, okay? And how to define those structural elements. But for now, we're just working with what we have kind of out of the box. Okay. All right, so here's our floor plan again, right? And I've drawn some walls, and we kind of know how to draw walls. We know how what those blue dimensions are, the temporary dimensions. We know how to make them real dimensions if we want them to stay. We know how to select items. We know how to delete them once we've selected them. We know how to add items to our selection set. We know how to delete items from our selection set, right? We know how to navigate about our model space, right? We can pan and zoom and we can orbit about the space. Not too bad. Let's just look at a couple of our other drawing tools. I'm going to come back up here to my architecture tab, click. I'm going to click on wall. And you're going to notice that we have a rectangle, okay? I can click on rectangle, right? We do have a bunch of options, which we're not going to worry about right now. But a rectangle, I click, I move in the direction I want to go, okay? And I can decide how large I want that by looking at those blue temporary dimensions. Okay, click, and there is my object. All right. One thing I am actually going to show you right now, it's a little bit advanced-ish, is that when I create these objects, I click on wall, I go to rectangle. When I drew this, did you see that I am drawing it from, it's drawing from the center line of that wall, right? Until you've probably actually worked in an office, you don't maybe understand why that's super important, right? But drawing things from the center line adds space on either side, right? So maybe you want to draw from the outside of the wall, maybe you want to draw from the inside of the wall, right, to get a precise dimension. This one is giving you center to center, okay? I can come over here to properties while I'm in that command. I have a location line right here. And if I click down on that location line, oh, I have to, let me click on that. I had to do it before I start clicking because it's already kind of established that wall center line. But I can click down and I can choose to draw, ooh, why isn't it? WA wall. There we go. Yeah, yeah. Yours is working then, obviously, right? Why? Oh, are you guys getting those options popping up? Why isn't mine popping up? WA, okay. So when you initiate the command, if you're in it, it won't work, and obviously it's not working well. Oh, that's weird. Well, you can select it and you can change it, so I could, all right, what's happening with mine? Let me create, maybe I've done something in here. I'm going to start a new file. Huh. That is very weird. Location line, level 1 to level 2. I feel like I'm almost, hold on, let me drag these over here and see if I've got something else happening. Well, I've got something going on. But ideally, right, and all of you, it seems like it's working for you. So something is funny in my drawing, even though it's a new drawing. You are able to control where you want that wall to be drawn. I have a floor plan. Yes, I have selected an architectural wall. Uh-oh. Here we go. Huh. Let's see. Oh, I know why. I know why. Well, here's my problem. I can't alter anything because I haven't copied my systems files to my T drive yet because I don't have a T drive. So I think I think Revit won't let me change anything in this out of the box Revit here. So I'm gonna have to get that changed by Monday so I can start altering things. Because you all can do it, right? You all can drop down that menu and it says finish face exterior, finish face interior, right? I think that's my problem. Yes. I need to get that sorted out then. I wasn't thinking it was a big deal. But, so doesn't look like I'm allowed to change anything. It's okay. But you want to pay attention where you're drawing your walls from, right? Because it makes a big difference. Your client is like, I can only have 100 square feet. That is it. No less, no more, like right on 100 square feet. You're going to want to draw, and we'll say that's, the interior space. You're going to want to draw from finished face interior, right? So you get a 10 by 10 or whatever equals 10 square feet of space in there. If you draw from the outside, you can have more space on the inside or less space on the inside because of the wall assembly, right? So kind of where you're drawing from is a big deal, okay? Yep.
The core, what is that?
The core, it's the structure.
Would that include the plywood sheeting or no?
No, it doesn't. It depends. You can define the structure of your object. Like you could define the structure as the plywood and the stud, then that is your core.
Oh,
Yes. But you can also just define it as like the stud and then that would be your core.
okay.
Yeah, that's a good question. Okay. All right. So that's one thing you're going to want to recognize, right? So my point in going that direction was that when I have a rectangle, click, right? If I have wall center line defined, then when I draw this, do you see how it's drawing from the center line of the assembly, right? And if your assembly is something like, 6 inches, 6 and 5/8, right? You're like, well, what's half of 5/8 of an inch? What's half of 3 plus half of 5/8 to get the center line to determine what the offset on the inside of the space is, right? It's a pain in the neck. So really, you're just going to want to draw this the appropriate way in the beginning, okay? So I'm drawing my rectangle. I can have my temporary dimensions kind of show me how the size of this and click and it creates that object, okay? The rectangle, usually the way that I go about drawing them is I draw them generally the way that I want them to be drawn, the size generally. And if I need them to be a different size, I'm going to hit escape. I'll come back and pick the object and I'll change it. So maybe 11 foot, 8 inches, enter. And then I'll select this object and say, well, maybe I want it to be 10 foot, enter, okay? Another thing that's a little bit different in Revit than AutoCAD, and it's said in the name, Revit is short for revise it, right? I feel like when you draw, you don't always draw things the exact right size the first time. Sounds very counterintuitive when you've drawn in AutoCAD, because in AutoCAD you want to get it right the first time, right? It's the right size. But in Revit you generally will get things in the right spot, you'll generally get them the right size, then you will revise them to how you want them to be, okay? And the same thing applies to creating objects. So when I want to create a brand new wall type in Revit, I don't just click on new wall type, the new wall type button. I take an object that's existing and I copy it and I revise it to make it what I want it to be. All right, so again, a little counterintuitive, you have to get used to it, but it's really, Revit makes it very easy to revise things, so it's not that cumbersome, okay? So when I'm going along and I'm drawing, right, I click on the wall command, I choose the way that I want to draw with a line, I pick my wall type, I choose the location line, and then I start drawing, right? And I type something in like 10 foot. I don't even have to have the foot mark. See, there's my AutoCAD coming out. 10 foot. And maybe this is going to be 50 foot. Enter. And I zoom and I pan a little bit because it's off the screen. I zoom out and we'll make this something like 35 foot. I don't need the foot mark. And then I come up here and hey, that looks pretty good, right? Click. Do you notice that when I'm getting a little bit of a hint of an object snap? Okay, an object snap in AutoCAD will allow you to draw lines orthogonal, right? So we have ortho, we have polar tracking, we have, well, just kind of iterations of that, I guess, right? That help us draw straight lines, polar tracking, polar, and then ortho, right? We also have things like midpoint, endpoint, nearest, perpendicular to help us get those lines exactly where we want them on other objects, okay? We have we have a kind of a simplified version of that in Revit, where you notice that as I move in the direction of this line, it's starting to, you see how it lines up with things, right? So if I want to line up with this wall up here, I just kind of get up to wherever it's at and it lines up and I click, right? If I want to come over here and line up with it, maybe in the vertical, I just hover down and touch it. I don't click, but I hover down and I touch it, click. And it kind of shows me where these objects are. And you see that's an endpoint and it tells me if I hover. If I want to capture something like a midpoint, right, like I'm drawing from here, click, I want to grab the midpoint of this wall. I see it kind of pop up there, right? There's midpoint. But the way that object snaps work in Revit is with the right click. So right click, and here are my snap overrides, and there are all of my snaps. Very rarely, honestly, I mean, I use these, I have them on all the time in AutoCAD. I'm constantly looking for the right snap in AutoCAD, right? I'm shift right clicking to get the one I want, right? I don't that often go into this menu, to be honest, in Revit, every now and again. But this will force this to appear for one movement. So I go to midpoint, click, and now that midpoint shows up and I can click on it. A few pop up, right? There's endpoint, there's midpoint, we have nearest, which is kind of showing up in the pink, right? So I get 2 or 3 of these. I don't get, I've got horizontal, that's horizontal, similar to perpendicular, right? So I get a few of them popping up, but not as many as AutoCAD. So those are our drawing aids, right? Remember, if I want to select this whole outer boundary, I can hover, tab once, it picks whatever is chained, connected there. Okay. All right, let's look at a couple of other drawing commands. These are going to be very simple for you to learn, especially if you've had AutoCAD before. Line, which is wall, right? Rectangle, using the wall command. I'm going to come back to architecture. I'm going to go to wall, and I'm going to choose, you know, we have some polygon shapes here, right? So inscribed polygon and circumscribed polygon. So an inscribed polygon is drawn inside of a circle, essentially, when it's created, just like this illustration shows, right? A circumscribed one is drawn to the outside of a circle, just like that, okay? So I click a center point, I move in the direction I want to go. You'll notice that I'm getting a radius, right? But you'll also notice that I have a certain amount of sides created. I have 6. If I want to change the amount of sides, I have some options up here to do that. Click, backspace, 9, enter. So now I have 9, right? Or let's do 4, which is square. Or let's do 3, right? We have a triangle. Okay. So then I would just specify the radius. Let's do 12 foot. Oops, not 312. There we go. Okay, and again, if my walls are overlapping, Revit is pretty smart. It says, hey, did you mean to overlap walls like that? And you're like, nope, I didn't. Okay. I can also come back in and make this a different size if I would like, right? We get temporary dimensions going from different spots. I can make this 12 foot, right? I can also, here's a couple of things that will help us modify that are a little different than in AutoCAD. Revit has a nudge option and it also has a drag, okay? If I click on an object and I want to move it, I can use the move command. I can use the temporary dimensions to change it, but I can also use a nudge option, which is on the keyboard, the up and down arrows and the side to side arrows, right? Click, 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 click with my arrows. I can move things. I actually wish AutoCAD had this option. Nudge would be really helpful in AutoCAD just to move things a tiny bit, right? But I can make things bigger, smaller, nudging them. Click. Okay. I can also drag an object. I don't suggest it because I think that sometimes when you drag, you may also select something else that you're unaware of, which happens all the time. Probably where most mistakes happen is when you're new at Revit and you think, oh, I'm going to make this bigger, I'm going to drag it, which if you hover over a selected item and that little crosshair pops up with the 4 arrows, if you click your left mouse button and hold, I'm dragging it out, let go, right? But if this is a very simple drawing, but if there was a floor on here and there was furniture below and there was, you know, bearing walls below and there was a foundation and footings and all this stuff, right? And I clicked here, I could accidentally grab all of those items. And by doing that, it would really kind of mess everything up, right? So I had intended just to maybe move this wall, but everything below it moved with it when I drug it, right? So dragging is maybe good for moving furniture. I'd even just be very careful with it in general, okay? Okay, so let's draw a couple of other things. Before I do that, let me turn my crop region on and off. I want to remind you and show you what that crop region does. Are you getting some errors over there? Just a few. I keep hearing ding, ding, ding. Everybody's computer. That's too funny. I'm going to turn my crop region on and off. So this right now, if I hover, oops, this one, it shows my crop region. Okay, I can drag my crop region in. Right? You see what happens, right? If I go to level 2, this is on level 1. If I go to level 2, click, click, you see that everything is still there, right? That crop region is view specific. I'm going to close this out, go back to my level 1. Okay. We can set up templates so that visually things are view templates so that visually things look the same. You can apply this view template, and then once you've set up one drawing, it applies that to as many as you choose, right? So that's helpful. The crop region is really not dependent on a view region or on a view template though. So that is something that you will have to go in on every single view that you have of your model and alter so that it's appropriate. Okay. All right. Let's look at a couple of other drawing options. I'm going to go to level 1 here, which I'm on. And I'm going to come up here to architecture, wall. And so we have our line, we have our rectangle, we have our polygons, we have our circle, right? Circle, very easy. I click on circle, I click, move in the direction I want to go, click again, click, move in the direction I want to go. I could type a dimension, 10 foot, enter. Okay. If I would like to change that, I hit escape, I click on an item, and it reveals its properties. Another thing you're going to have to get used to in Revit is that properties and options don't always appear when nothing is selected, right? So I'll have somebody say, oh, I thought I wanted to change the radius of that circle, but I don't see where to do that, right? And I will always say you have to select an item to get the properties to show, right? So when I select this item, the wall properties show here, and then also the radius shows, so I can alter things like that, right? But if I hit escape, this just shows I'm in a floor plan, and it shows floor plan properties. It doesn't show object properties. Okay, so make sure you know you have to select items. We'll alter it. We'll say 4 foot, enter. There we go. Okay, zoom extents. Let's go back to wall. Okay, I've got arcs. You know, some of these you can play with. These are all versions, iterations of arc, beginning, end, click, center, right? It's not as complicated as AutoCAD where you have a positive and a negative direction. You just kind of move your, Leela knows, arc is my nemesis. I hate arc. I never use it. I think you probably all know about AutoCAD. I never use arc. So I'll show you this one and you guys can, if you choose to figure out the rest, that's fine. But what's that? I use circle. If I have to make an arc, I use a circle and I trim it. Yep, that's what I do. I don't like arc. It just never works. It never works the way you want it to, right? So I can, you know, choose to have it whatever direction I want. It's very easy, right? I can preview what's happening. I could type 15, enter, and I have a 15, an arc where there's a radius of 15, right? So pretty easy to use. And I actually don't use arc in Revit either because usually when I'm trying to create a rounded corner on something, which is what an arc does, I use fillet instead, or trim, right? So there, I just move my way around arc. Okay, one other drawing command we'll talk about today. I don't think we're going to go the entire time today, but I think this is kind of a good thing for you to sit on. We don't have class on Monday for Labor Day, right? So you kind of, what's that? Did everybody forget? I mean, you can come if you'd like. School will actually be closed, so you can't come if you'd like.
I was kind of email, I'm like, I can't come on Monday. And then my brother's like, we don't have school on Monday.
You're like, thank you. Thank you, long weekends, right?
I have some questions.
Yeah.
So you see how you kind of drew within those little markers? Does that matter? Are you gonna way bigger than those? I don't know.
No. Well, okay, so let's talk about what will happen if you do that, right? So you're talking about these, right?
Yeah, those.
Okay, so we'll talk about these a little bit more in depth, but Ellie, right? Ellie, she's asking, well, my lines are kind of outside of these little markers. What happens? Okay. Well, these little markers are elevation markers. And so items that are seen in front of them will be shown in elevation, and items that are out beyond them won't be shown. Okay. So the extent of the elevation is shown if I click on this little viewer right there. So right now, this is the east elevation, right? This is north, east, south, west. So if I go to my east elevation, click, click, I see all of my objects, right? Most of them. I clicked on that little marker, and if I actually click on the line, oh, it's not giving me my extent. Oh, see, so if you click on that blue line, it will show a little dashed region, right? Are you guys getting that? It should show it. Mine won't allow me to alter it, I don't think.
Like, this line? That one?
Yeah.
Supposed to be that somewhere?
Let's see. Click on that. Oh, these are exterior elevations. That's why. Let me show you something else here. If we go to don't worry about doing this. Okay. All right, so here's my elevation. This is just going to go to the extent. So these exterior elevation markers, you'll just see, right? I'm seeing a portion of this. We're seeing everything here, right? With this marker that I made, I am allowed to alter it. You see how I have these grips that allow me to choose the depth of it, right? But essentially anything that is within the boundary of this line will be shown here, okay, in your elevation, I guess is what I should say. Okay, so if this wall, for example, I nudge it over so it's kind of out of that boundary, right? Or maybe it's slightly out of the boundary, then it wouldn't show. Well, it doesn't matter anyway because it's, you can't really tell which is which in that elevation, right? But let's see if we can get it to cut it. Maybe it'll look a little bit weird if it cuts it. Okay, I can double click on this little marker too. Click, click, really fast. I'm going to shade. Let's figure out, I'm going to do a wall tile or window tile. Wall tile. Hold on a second. I went to a 3D view. Where is all of my stuff? Oh, well, those are other drawings, that's why. Okay. I had 2 drawing projects open, that's why there was blank in one of them. All right, so here's our drawing here, and I'm gonna go to floor plan. Oh, we're in class.
Oh, sorry. Actually, I just take the class this morning. I take this class, but today.
Well, but we're in our class, so right now, are you in this class?
Yeah.
This class.
Yeah, this class. I think this
In Revit?
2, 3, 5.
2350, what's your name?
I'm Romeo. I just take this class today.
Oh, okay, you just started.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, that's okay. Okay. Well, let's look at these. The intent of what I was doing was to kind of look at the elevation and see which objects I was looking at. So this object, which is being cut by that elevation line, I'm going to select it, and then I'm going to come over here, and oh, it's right there. Okay, so this is the actual elevation, the east elevation, right? This is the floor plan view. I have them both on the screen, okay, so that I can see which object is which. All right. So I look at this. Oh. Did you need help?
Yeah, I just need to grab a model. Is that all right?
Yep, that's fine. You're okay. Okay, so so that is that object and it's being cut, right? And the nice thing about this, again, these objects being parametric, having a relationship, right? If I move them, do you see how it kind of changes itself? Okay. This is even more fantastic when you are when you're drawing building sections and floor plans and different things, right? And you move a wall and immediately in the elevation it changes, and it doesn't do that in AutoCAD, right? Okay. Yep.
What is the difference between the line that shows up when you click on the arrow
The square will tell you where, so when I drag this onto a sheet, like on A101 or whatever, this marker will tell you where it's at. So it will say 1 on 203. So 1 is the head and 1 is the marker, essentially.
When you click on the arrow, you know, how that line shows up?
Uh-huh.
You want to move it, then do you move the line?
Yeah, you can move the line itself. So what I'm doing when I move the line, I click on it, and that line highlights, and I click on the line itself, and I drag it. I hold down the mouse button, and I drag it back and forth.
Does it matter that they're not touching?
No, they don't have to touch. This elevation, I mean, you're defining where these elements happen, so I could click on this and drag it all the way over to here, and it would be appropriate. That'd be fine. And I can add others in as well to capture different things. All right, so we'll look at one more drawing method today. Whoops. Okay. And that is going to be, oh, I did something good. Now it erased that error. Anyway, I'm going to choose the pick method to create objects. All right. So if, for example, I have an exterior wall here, and I think to myself, well, I want to have another wall 6 feet away from that wall. Okay. I can use the pick method to draw objects. So I can click on this little pick lines. And here we will have to enter an option immediately to get it to work, but it's going to ask for an offset. So I'm going to type in something like 6 feet, enter. And then I'm going to go hover on some objects. You see that line pop up? That's giving me a 6 foot offset. Okay, and you can offset to either side, right? You see how I hover and it chooses, but if I click, it creates it. And if it clicks, it creates it. And it is offsetting them at 6 feet. So this is helpful for, for general drawing construction. There are things that you're going to want to, like if you want a hallway 3 feet, you can draw the hallway offset 3 feet from one side of the wall, right? But what this is really helpful for, and something that we'll talk about immediately next week, is if you have a CAD drawing and you are tracing over the top of the CAD drawing in Revit, right? You can use this pick option to very quickly start drawing over the top of your CAD drawing. Okay, those of you that have worked, right, you know that how valuable probably that is, right, to go in and be able just to pick everything and start getting a really good drawing created very quickly from something that you have in AutoCAD already generated. Okay, so pick lines will be very helpful for that. Revit is, it took me a little while to get used to drafting in it. When you've only drafted in Revit, then that's great, but when you've drafted in both Revit and AutoCAD, it takes a little getting used to, right? When you're in AutoCAD, when you're drafting, I feel like the way that you go about it is you draw a lot of extra geometry, right, to create geometry, like you're offsetting things, and then you're deleting the offsets you don't need, and you're drawing midlines to mirror across, right, and then you're deleting those mirror lines, and you're drawing past items, and then you trim those items off that you don't need. But in Revit, it's almost like you just draw something, and then it, just like I said, you revise it, right? So you're not drawing a whole lot of extra geometry, but you're revising a lot, and you will use dimensions to help you get things the right size, essentially, okay? Which we'll get to all these things pretty quickly. Okay, any other questions so far? Yep.
Our plane that we're drawing this wall on,
Uh-huh.
is that visible or it's just?
No. So good question, right? You're like, well, we're on level 1, so where does that start and where does that stop? And can I see where that starts and where that stops, right? It's a work plane in Revit. It's a level, essentially, right? So if I let's look at a quick section of this. Don't worry about drawing the section. But the AutoCAD users can ooh and ah when I just draw a section by doing that, right? Click, click. Oh my gosh, it's a section, right? This is one of the best parts, people. But you're drawing at level 1 right now, and we'll talk about how to define where walls start and where they stop, right? But this is level 1. It's a level. It's a work plane essentially, right? And all of these objects currently, if I click on it, do you see their base constraint is level 1? They start at level 1, okay? And they go up to level 2. So the top constraint is level 2. So this wall lives between level 1 and level 2. right? And we can change those definitions and we can offset them and we can make them shorter, taller, whatever you want them to be. It's a good question. Okay, anything else? You had a question?
I answered it myself.
Okay, good. No. All right. Okay, so I'll just let that kind of simmer over the weekend. No homework yet. I'll just let you guys kind of think about this. Next week we'll start with the homework. We'll start with drawing. We'll start with, a lot of good stuff. What?
The quizzes too.
Yes, we'll start with some quizzes next week, right? Yeah.
What is beyond?
Stuff we talk about in class. Yeah, stuff we talk about in class.
Right?
What's that?
Every week.
I can't hear what you're saying.
Is it every week?
Not every week. Yeah, I'm Jeff doesn't, so yeah, right, Jeff retired. So I won't do them every single week. They'll be intermittent. Jeff really liked to have quizzes every week, but
Is it open book?
yeah. All of my quizzes are always open book and you can look them up online, and I've just kind of, there is never a time in the real world where you can't look something up, right? Like whether it's code or if it's, anything, right? If it's a software question or zoning or planning, anything, you always have a resource to look it up generally. So
Call you and ask.
no, that you cannot do. You have to do it yourself, but you can research it and find it any way you feel appropriate.
Have a time or limit?
Not usually, no. They're usually like 10 questions based on lecture, and I'll put them on Canvas so you can take them at home. You can take them anywhere, and they're usually not timed.
Are we gonna have like a midterm exam?
No. You have a midterm project, but we won't have a midterm exam. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, enjoy your Labor Day. Yep. What's that? Yes. Let me just get this stopped here.